I thought I would just be a little British for you. I was like, I was scrambling. It's 5:55 a.m. in the morning over here,
Whoa.
and I've got my cup of coffee, and I was like, man, I need to put a cap on, otherwise my hair looks not as put together as yours.
Yeah, but mine's very, very grey, being an old man.
I was
Although
like,
I have been grey since I was about 13, Robbie. So
there we go.
it's. But yes,
And
our Rigby outstanding gun makers. They are doing incredibly well.
yeah,
Incredibly
what do
well.
so you are in the gun business. I don't want to introduce you quite yet. You're in the gun business. Rigby's and the Purdy's of the world and the Holland and Hollands of the world, they come from the UK. Like, that is the bastion of gun makers. I got two questions. Number one, firstly, why? Like, why is the bastion of gun making out of the United Kingdom? Maybe I'm just naive to the idea of like, why these really famous brands? Is it because of colonial past and the big rich white trophy hunters going to Africa, and that's when they just needed big bore caliber guns?
I think that probably the Italians would argue that the bastion of gun making is in Italy, with Beretta probably being the oldest gun maker
Yeah,
in the
but
world.
shotguns, I get that. They don't make big bore guns.
No, and I think that it does hark back to their halcyon days, of the days when all the London clubs, there was always views that people would finish their lunch with their children or their godsons or their nephews, and then they'd walk up Pall Mall and they'd go into South Audley Street or they'd go into Bruton Street and they'd order guns after lunch.
Now,
Um,
what sector of society does that?
I think it's a bit like what made Aston Martin produce cars in the UK, or some of the Savile Rows, probably some of the best suits in the world. It's craftsmanship. And Purdy is owned by Richemont, who have maisons that pride themselves in the artisans that produce goods. And we need to keep those brands and that heritage and that skill, because I think that is reflective of a society that didn't throw things away,
Hmm.
appreciated that. If ever you get the chance to go, I've been very lucky. I've been to the Purdy factory, and the craftsmanship of people using a chisel to engrave on steel works of art. They are nothing other than works of art. And the thousands of hours, and people, when they buy them, some people buy art, some people buy cars, some people buy sporting estates. To them, it is a thing of beauty. Some of them don't even ever use them.
Hmm.
It is, thank the Lord, that we have people that are still willing to invest and appreciate the skill of a London-made best gun. And you've got not only the Hollands and the Purdys, you have Boss. Those three brands represent outstanding craftsmanship.
Well, Dylan Williams, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It seems very bizarre to be the other side of the pond speaking to you. For you, a
Oh,
very early part of the day.
this is the new generation, Dylan. Come on, man. Let's get with the times. You've got a cell phone in your hand. This isn't the freaking 15th century where, yes, you can walk up the street and get your fine guns.
Yeah.
You can do beautiful podcasting. I think that's the sort of niche that we fit in, is that yes, we're a advocacy for we're an advocate for hunting and pro hunting around the world, but we have these conversations with people from all walks of life, from all corners of the world. And I think we're sort of just breaking this barrier right now. And people are like, geez, who's Robbie going to have next? Because the typical people that are on the podcast circuit that you hear constantly over and over and over again don't seem to make it onto the Blood Origins podcast.
No, I think that, and I think we perhaps are not the best communicators in the positive aspects of what those people that enjoy rural pursuits, particularly in the UK. I was speaking to someone only the other day that what has happened in the United Kingdom, that those that are decision makers and politicians, and indeed people that are our representatives in Parliament, hardly anybody seems to recognise the good that farmers, landowners, land managers, gamekeepers, river keepers, and gillies do. We are simply custodians of the countryside for the next generation. And as someone said to me, you may have seen recently in Europe, farmers blocking the roads with tractors, and it's now happening in parts of South Wales and it's happening in Dover, where farmers have said enough is enough. And quite rightly, as someone said to me once, don't complain about a farmer with your mouth full.
Yep, 100%.
You need a doctor, maybe if you're unlucky, once, twice a year. You need your dentist once, twice a year. You need a farmer 3 times a day.
Yep.
And I worry in the United Kingdom that the advocacy for rewilding, that trees are the be all and end of everything, is we are a very small island with 66 million people, and we need to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And people will know around the world, food security at the moment is an incredibly important aspect of how we integrate with other countries. But also, I think that farmers are running businesses, and the Welsh government, many of your listeners may have had the pleasure of shooting in parts of Wales. They are advocating that every farmer in that country dedicate 10% of their land to environmental sustainable schemes and another 10% for tree planting.
Jeez.
Now, I don't know many businesses that can lose 20%, but there are levels of subsidy. But once you lose the skill set of how to farm, because generations leave, and that applies to grouse keepers and gamekeepers and river keepers, once they're lost, regaining that knowledge is incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dylan, why do you think in a society like we have today, where we've been through COVID, we're seeing issues and challenges tied to food insecurity constantly, that there's still this massive disparaging outlook around hunting, in which you've got this phenomenal food resource on the landscape that, if done correctly, is infinitely sustainable, that could mitigate food insecurities from the poorest of the poor to the highest end restaurant, and it fits all models.
Well, it'll probably come as a significant surprise to many people in America, but we probably release into the United Kingdom 50 to 60 million pheasants and partridges every year.
It's unbelievable.
People are now paying to go driven pheasant shooting and partridge shooting, anywhere between 50, 60, 70 pound a bird.
That's not, and how many birds a day?
There would be anywhere, the UK average is reputed to be about 140 birds a day, but many shoots are shooting 300-400 a day.
Unbelievable.
Now, on top of that, you have the grouse shooting, and the red grouse is unique to the United Kingdom. You can find it nowhere else in the world. It is without doubt the most, I love the grouse. I love the habitat the grouse lives in upland and moorland, and the environment that it lives in is true wilderness. But as to your question about the resource, for my sins, I got involved in an organization 5 years ago because we could see a situation between the disparity of the production of the shot game that we had. And whilst there was great value in that bird whilst it was flying, the oversupply for the market was so great that we were really worried that the Armageddon for us was when the gamekeepers were being told by their owners, well, head gamekeeper, we're really looking forward to the next 10 days of the shooting season. And the gamekeeper says, well, the problem is the game larder is full. The game dealers don't want any more. Where am I going to put them?
Yep.
That never happened. But we created an organization called the British Game Assurance, which created for the first time ever an assurance scheme demonstrating best practice on the production of games so that the retailers, the supermarkets, the restaurateurs could see, in the same way as beef, pork, lamb is all assured, we could demonstrate the game is assured. And we had some tremendous successes, and we now have a structured assurance scheme in the United Kingdom that estate owners can demonstrate to food producers that they are getting a proven product. The assurance scheme has now been bequeathed or handed over to an organization called Aim to Sustain, which is a new organization or a new partnership in the United Kingdom that has brought together all 9 key organizations to act as a singular voice when discussing rural pursuits and shooting and countryside management to government and decision makers, leaving an organization which I'm still involved in, which is called Eat Wild, which is the marketing of game. And we are fairly and squarely not looking to promote those people that pursue shooting to consume the game. What we're looking for is people that are the millennials, Gen X, who are looking for minimal food miles.
Yep.
They want protein that has no antibiotics. They want protein, venison, 0 food miles, no antibiotics, high in selenium, 0 fat. And as Cillian Murphy, who won the BAFTA the other night for Oppenheimer, he broke 12 years of vegetarianism, and his
Yes,
first
I saw that.
meal was venison.
I saw the video link.
Yep.
I was like, who is this guy? Well, clearly because I'm just in the dark ages, right? And my wife is like, you don't know who that is?
Yeah.
That's Oppenheimer guy. And I was like, oh shit, really? And the dude was saying, and then he said, I broke veganism
To eat venison.
on venison.
Yep. And interestingly, we had a situation earlier this year where we have had 32 nursery schools teaching children between the ages, I think, of about 6 and 11. They are now serving 3,000 meals a month to those children with principally venison, but with also feathered game. And
is that through Eat Wild, Dylan, or is that through Aim to Sustain?
The Eat Wild is the marketing body that is help. So we make an effort to go to the National Health Service, to the MOD, which is a Ministry of Defence, to our military, even the prison service, because protein is expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But venison, last year in the United Kingdom, there were 70,000 car accidents involving deer that had insurance claims against. That doesn't cover the other ones that didn't happen. So we have got literally an explosion, which has been exacerbated by COVID, of all the deer populations, and we have 6 different deer species in the UK. They've all exploded. So we have as you said, we have a resource that needs to be managed because people want to plant trees. We have a resource in the form of a ready supply of it, but we have to educate people that it is not a Victorian dish that with pheasants you hang them until they're green and their tail feathers are hanging, which is what some people did.
Well, that's what my aunt does. My aunt, in South Africa, driving down the road, happened to smack a guinea fowl, slapped it in the back of the car, and hung it for 10 days
Whoa.
to cure the meat. I was like, oh, God, Jutta.
One of my favorite wild meat would be probably mallard, wild duck, grouse, and partridge. And I love venison. And why would I not eat that as opposed to eating? We kill 25 million chickens a week in the UK. Why would I not eat something that's far tastier? I know where it's come from. I probably harvested it myself. It's probably better for me. The chickens are probably 14, 16 weeks of age max. Whereas we're looking at game birds they've been out in the wild since June, July. They're eating natural food. But it's a continual communication process to take away the fear factor of cooking game.
Yeah.
And it is a fear factor. And I think we need to educate. And so we had last autumn, we went to the city of Newcastle in the north of England, which has got a very large university of obviously young people. And in one day, over 1,200 students had the ability to try game, having never ever tried it before. Because if you're a student, it's a great thing. It's cheap, it's
Yeah.
tasty, it's easy to produce, and again, it's incredibly wholesome. Very interestingly, which is something that was a fascinating scenario. My daughter went to Oxford, and she's a very good tennis player, and she was made the captain of the first team, and she was told she had to host the social event. And she rang me and said, I don't want to just do a normal social event. They've said maybe 15, 20 guys will come to it. I want to do a barbecue with just game.
Oh
So I
man.
spoke to a friend of mine, and we had venison burgers and uh, pheasant baps and everything else. And 160 students turned up during the day. And
Oh
a
my
group of
God.
4 girls turned up. And Jasmine, my daughter, said, I'm really sorry. I did tell you it was game. I know you're vegan, and therefore I've got nothing for you. And they said, no, we're vegan because we don't want to eat mass-produced
Mm-hmm.
industrialized beef and lamb. We'll eat game because we can see it being helping the countryside be managed. We know that it's sustainable and it's tasty. And they ate the venison and they ate the pheasant, which was a light bulb moment for us at Eat Wild, because we thought, and the other market that's massive for us now is those people that get great enjoyment going out to the gym and wanting to pack themselves full of protein.
Right.
And venison supplies that facility, and they are really, really into it, which is great.
Yeah, then I think you're hitting on the whole veganism thing. I don't know if you've heard of or come across Katie Hargreaves in the UK.
Yes, I have, very much so. I follow Katie.
So Katie and I, we finally got to meet each other face to face. She's a phenomenal artist. She gave us some great art for our auctions and fundraisers and whatnots. And Katie is a vegan, will eat vegan, but she'll eat wild game. And I asked her when we podcasted together, I said, well, why? Like, how does that doesn't gel typically in society? And she was like, well, I may not be like a hardcore vegan, but from my belief perspective, same as what you just articulated, I'm not in the whole for mass production of meat. That's what I'm against. I don't think that for the vast majority, not, I won't say vast majority, I don't want to colloquialize anybody here in that, they just don't believe in the ethics around mass production from meat perspective. But she said, if you look at hunting, specifically hunting for animals that like a Chinese water deer where they're overpopulated and the overpopulation is causing a detriment to the health of that population, by hunting them, you are actually hitting the exact ethic of veganism, which is health, sort of a boost, a health to the greater generation of the greater population. And she says, because of that fact, it fit with my ethos of veganism, and I could eat that meat.
But the problem is, Robbie, we have got over the last 2 or 3 generations, we have lost the connection between where and how food is produced and how it gets onto your table. And therefore, I genuinely believe if some people knew how their food was produced, many more people would consider giving up current meals that they're eating. And the ability to pick up the phone and get a pizza delivered to your house or a burger delivered to your house, when the backstory for the production of that beef animal is a big deal. And there are people out in the countryside that have worked for 365 days to produce the highest quality beef that they can, or the highest lamb, or the highest quality in our world game birds. And yet we need to get back to, where does your food come from?
Yeah, I think that is the key. One of the things we're starting to make some strides in Australia, and one of the narratives in Australia is really the same from an English perspective, is that you've got this phenomenal resource in the landscape. For the most part, or actually all of it in Australia, is a non-native species.
Yeah.
And so there's connotations of being feral that is not a good thing, because if you label something feral, then you have to wipe it out because it's not good for the landscape. But as being a non-native, it's actually, you know, at a certain sustainable population level, it has no real detrimental effect to it. And so you can take that, to your point, you take that resource, and now you talk about it in the food context. You talk about it in the protein context. You talk about it in the health context. You talk about it in the, you gym rats like to eat a lot of protein. Here's the best protein available. It's outside your front door. And actually in Australia, it's free.
Right.
Go get it.
The other thing is, Robbie, that's so important is that, for example, if you take grouse shooting, so the grouse as a bird relies entirely on a habitat of heather, which is a small plant, and they require insects from hatching for the first 21 days, and then they will eat the tips of the heather. The skill of a good grouse keeper is to create a mosaic of different age heathers so that there's sufficient heather in order for the hen birds to nest in, for the chicks to run for cover if there's predators, and for the young heather, they're always able to eat the tips to give them the growth. If we elect as a country to curtail or stop grouse shooting, what is the rationale for maintaining the maintenance of that habitat, which requires management? It requires the influence of man to be able to maintain that habitat.
Mm-hmm.
With the understanding that upland moorland in the United Kingdom is a habitat that's rarer than the Amazonian rainforest. But the politics behind hunting and shooting by the vociferous minority that don't either like or maybe misunderstand what we're trying to achieve could see us lose one of the rarest habitats in the world. And with it, because of it, not only in the north of England, but in parts of Scotland, we will lose whole communities because some grouse moors are employing 10, 12 or more gamekeepers. They have children. There's a very famous story of one grouse moor where the locals had a worry that the owner was going to leave. And they said, if you leave, we do not know whether the next owner will continue the shooting or the number of gamekeepers, which will mean the village shop will close. It's highly likely the village school will close. If there's not so much shooting, the local hotel and the Airbnbs may close. And therefore, in many parts of the United Kingdom, hunting is the catalyst
Mm.
awful lot of commercial aspects, but also when one looks in this day and age of people concerned about mental health, it is an opportunity on a weekly or a fortnightly basis for people of a like mind to come together, carry out exercise by beating or using their dogs to pick up birds or whatever. But there's a social network that is created that we must acknowledge has a value. And increasingly, I obviously have worries and concerns about how hunting and shooting is viewed in this country. But my greater worry is the British countryside, because there are assumed to be about 4,000 full-time gamekeepers in this country. I'm of an advocate that they should be called wildlife rangers, because many of them are outstanding conservationists. They understand wildlife management, they understand about habitat management, and it may be semantics, but if we lost 4,000 rangers, there would be a hue and cry in the
Mm-hmm.
whole of the United Kingdom. But all the management of the 74% of land that has shoots on in the United Kingdom that's been managed is being done at not a penny cost to the public purse. If we saw the demise of shooting and the practices that are required to maintain it, I have no idea where the money will come to maintain the British countryside, the 99.99% of the population that don't work in it but enjoy it. Where's it going to come from?
Yeah.
And that's a real worry.
Dylan, has anybody done anything, any content around showcasing that? Like going into a small town in Wales or a small town in Scotland and
Many of the organizations,
going into a bar, just essentially going into a pub and going, hey, what do you think about hunting? And what would happen to you if hunting was
there are,
banned?
what's happened is, and it was created up in Scotland, and they're called the moorland groups. And in each one of them, they run almost like satellites. And in the main, they seem to be run and driven by the wives of the gamekeepers. And they have become incredibly powerful on social media by communicating. And there's one which is called the Grampian Moorland Group, which is located principally to the west of Aberdeen. Obviously, if it was in the east, it would be in the sea. But it's the west of Aberdeen, and they are doing profiles on people that are not shooting, but that their income and their livelihoods are derived from rural pursuits in that area, be it salmon fishing or grouse shooting or whatever. And Aim to Sustain, which is now this conglomerate of the 9 organizations, is trying to do that. And I do think it's interesting that just recently, as I said earlier, in many instances, farmers were almost maligned and gamekeepers were definitely maligned.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you have this, yes, it is an uprising of farmers, because rural people are not really known for being voluble or very garrulous. They just get on with the job.
Yeah, exactly.
And now that we have a sense of purpose where rural people are getting behind what is happening in the agricultural sector, I'm hopeful that people will look at the wider countryside management and says, who is looking after this? Interestingly, we've got major issues with waterways in this country, with vast amount of pollution through the releasing of sewage directly into the farms from the water authorities. The people that identified this and the people that are trying to bring the water authorities to book are the salmon fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
They were the first to see changes in the invertebrates in the river. They were the first to see the changes in the general health of the river. And we now have a situation that last year, the Atlantic salmon was officially classified as a red data species, which means it's in terminal decline. The Atlantic salmon, we've got some of the best,
Crazy.
we have some of the best salmon rivers in the world. And in a generation, it's now in grave danger of becoming extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And the balance is, I was speaking to a river keeper the other day, in the early 1900s, the number of goosanthers and mergansers was tiny. But now that they're protected, along with the otter, with the mink that we now try and control, we have seals, the amount of predators that are taking the smolts and the pars. So recent studies by the Atlantic Salmon Trust proved that through tagging, that for every 100 smolts that would make their way out to the river, only 3 would reach the estuary.
Wowza.
That's the level of predation that is now being protected by law. But I've always advocated that some organizations, if they were ultimately in charge, let's say they were in charge of the oceans, they would only be sharks and whales. Whereas what we should be looking after is plankton. Because if we have the plankton, everything else will come. And we have a situation that everybody perceives that the golden eagle, the hen harrier, the sea eagle, the peregrine falcon is the only bird to worry about. But they have to eat. They have to eat.
Dylan, isn't it? You're hitting on something that's almost global, which is, how do I couch this? A sense of value. it's a value chain on the resource. Like, what do you actually value? And a lot of these protection schemes of certain species, it's almost when you take a step back and like you say you're for wildlife, you say you're for conservation, yet your actions indicate you only care for this thing because it's charismatic
Yeah.
and because you can raise a lot of money with it. But everything else doesn't matter.
We're in a bizarre situation that the buzzword obviously around the world is carbon. We have got schemes that are encouraging landowners to plough up old meadows and indeed in parts of Scotland, peatland, where when they're ploughed, they're probably releasing 100, 200 years of carbon
That's crazy.
to plant Sitka spruce that is not indigenous to this species. Because of the climate that we have, it grows so fast that it's no good for lumber and timber for construction, so it gets pulped to go back into biomass boilers. And we've lost that habitat of the peat. And it's because some of our conservation organizations are immensely powerful. And because of their wealth and their power, they manage to influence politicians.
Hmm.
And politicians, because we now have a very urban-led government, 40 years ago, 50 years ago maybe, a lot of the members of parliament came from rural locations and they were representing the agricultural landowning community. That doesn't happen anymore because we've got so few people working the land. And therefore, the number of votes that relate to a member of parliament is tiny. They were saying there's 2,000 full-time equivalent jobs in shooting in Wales. Well, that's a rounding up number for a politician.
It's funny, again, you're hitting on things that are happening in the UK that are happening everywhere, right? This divide, this urban-rural divide, is one that is happening everywhere, and I've got this almost just like cheeky hypothesis that let's fast forward the clock 20 years or whatnot, or 30 years, that there's going to be not, I don't know if it's a division of state or just a division of politics, and it's going to be you urban people, your politics affect you, and we're going to demarcate, this is your area, and we're going to have this separate rural council that's going to be created, that's going to take care of their own. And then there's going to be almost like trade relations set up, like between US and China, but it's between the urban and the rural to say, okay, now let's see who's in charge.
And I think that rural people are very benign. And I can remember many years ago when Tony Blair, who was then our Prime Minister, probably he would argue he was hijacked to bring in a bill banning the hunting of foxes with hounds.
Yep.
Which went through our Parliament. But because of the way that the bill was written, many Welsh farmers who hunted in a totally different way, they were not on horseback, they didn't wear red jackets. These guys were producing, they had sheep and they were producing lambs. That was their livelihood. And in large parts of Wales, there are small woodlands where they would put in a small pack of hounds, and then farmers would circle the wood, and if the fox came out, they would then control them that way. And I can remember one of them telling me when this was also going to be banned at the same time as the generic hunting with hounds ban. And the location I was at provided all the water for the city of Liverpool in the northwest of the UK. And the farmer said to me, as a farmer, he said, there's only real 3 requirements of my life: to look after my family, put food on the table, and if I can, enjoy myself. If they take one of the legs of that 3-legged stool away, I'm going to get angry. And I wonder how the people of Liverpool will feel when they turn their taps on and the water's gone red.
Yeah.
And I just can see that, as you've advocated, there will need to be an understanding that we need a much more devolved and a more detailed knowledge of how rural areas work and operate, because I don't think the metropolitan government that we have, I don't think they even understand it. I really don't. In the
Yep.
main, there are some that do and are very good indeed.
Well, Dylan, what do you think is the outlook coming forward? If you looked in the crystal ball in the next 10 years or 15 years, are you optimistic? I would hope you are.
Um, I genuinely believe that we are now changing a process where people want to, as I said earlier, the Welsh government want 20% of land being put into environmental schemes. Unquestionably, there are areas of farms that require so much inputs to produce food, it's a waste of money. So there are areas of farms that you, instead of just looking at all of the 1,000 acres going on a farm, every one of those acres, you look at parts of your farm, say, you know what, on balance,
Yeah, one
leave
the places that don't make any money. It's a great scheme. It happens in America all the time. Conservation Reserve Program,
therefore.
Wetland Reserve Program.
Yeah, and I would like to see that there is an integrated scheme where conservation is looked up on a landscape scale. So you may get 20, 30 big landowners all working together, which is happening. It's been driven by an organization called the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, which is our lead scientific body, giving facts and evidence and science to government people. And if that does happen, I can see a situation where gamekeepers, as we currently know them, may become countryside rangers, wildlife rangers, conservation wardens, because their remit will not just be to produce game to be shot. They will be responsible for maybe up to 20% of the farm, the securing of grant aid and subsidies, but the implementation of tree planting schemes, creation of wetlands, somebody will have to do that job. And it won't be the guy that runs the dairy, and it won't be the guy that is running all the beef herd. Someone has to do it. And I can see these individuals being elevated to highly respected members of the community that are looking after the conservation interests and communicating with other landowners. Where, yes, at the moment, people in our world say, we have a shoot and we do so much for conservation. I would like to think going forward, we say, we have got a thriving local community. We produce food for our country and export. We do a tremendous amount for wildlife management, wildlife creation, conservation, habitat management. Oh, and by the way, we've got a shoot.
Mm.
So we change the narrative, because if people think the narrative we're using is working, they're staggeringly naive, because we're not doing very well in the way the general public view us. And to that end, I know people that have renamed their gamekeepers wildlife rangers. Their new uniforms are North Face, Patagonia. They are now integrating with the local community. And one in particular has got the name of the estate, and on the side of his Land Rover, it says Wildlife Ranger.
Nice.
People now come up and talk to him.
Nice.
Before, people thought that he was going to shoot their dog.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what we're trying to do is to communicate at a macro level that if you like walking on this heather moorland, it's because we have a grouse shoot, rather than get off our land, we've got a grouse shoot. So we all need to learn. We've created a new company recently trying to marry individuals that want to embrace a change. You know, the name gamekeeper was established in the early 1800s. Many of them would not say they're doing what gamekeepers did in the 1800s. They are
Mm.
far more wildlife rangers, conservation managers now than they were in the early 1800s. I therefore hope that young people will want to come into this world and they say, okay, I'm not going to be a die-hard gamekeeper, but I am still going to run a shoot. I'm still going to do it. And it may be that the perception of big days, big days game shooting may not be offered again. But it may be that we're going back to where we were in the 70s and the 80s, where people were delighted if they shot 100 pheasants in a day. Over the moon. I didn't shoot on a driven day till I was mid-20s, but I was shooting since the age of 10 where if we shot 2 pheasants, a rabbit, and a pigeon, my father would stay up till midnight because that was a big day.
Yeah, 100%.
And everything we shot, we ate.
Mm-hmm.
And people talk about the day shooting that they go on that I'm been involved in. I feel I was the lucky one doing the small days and the rough shooting and what you would call hunting. I feel I'm the lucky one, not going on a 400 bird day, not going on a 500 bird day, but having the ability to learn fieldcraft, to learn about all the tree species that I learned. You don't get that standing on a peg.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am hopeful because somebody needs to manage the countryside. Game is an incredible protein that we should harness and enjoy and celebrate that we can harvest it from the activities that we do. I'm delighted that we now, as a sector, have an assurance scheme that we can prove best practice is being followed. And I think many people that have traveled from all over the world would say the sport that is available in the United Kingdom is some of the best in the world. And it unequivocally is. People travel from all over the planet to come to the United Kingdom to enjoy driven grouse shooting, driven pheasant shooting, walked up grouse shooting, salmon fishing. We are a mecca for many sportsmen and
Yep.
hunters. And we should, as a country, be proud of that.
Yep. I agree.
We shouldn't put it under the carpet. We should be proud of it. And the environment and the countryside that people drive around, even if they're nothing to do with shooting, they don't realize that the woodlands and the hedgerows and the rivers, they're managed and were created in the first instance because of hunting. Some of the most beautiful woodland was created because the landowner wanted a pheasant drive, or he loved hunting, so he insisted on having a network of hedgerows that the horses could jump over. That's what created our countryside.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a good history, and hopefully continues into the future. Dylan, aim to sustain, eat wild. Where can people learn more about those kinds of things?
If they go, just type in Eat Wild, read all about it. We would love, I've always thought if we could get British game exported to America, it would solve our problems and it would be a great export. So Eat Wild is a great thing to look at just to see what we're doing. And it would be great to communicate from you guys in the States about what you do with game and how you promote it and so forth.
Well, the thing is, it's such a different system. We're not allowed to eat game here, right? It's part of the North American wildlife model that it's just you can't do it. Though there is one place in Hawaii that's taken an invasive species, axis, and made it FDA approved, and so they can sell it through the website. It's called Maui Nui.
Right.
The only wild game that you can get in the United States is venison, which is elk, New Zealand farm raised elk.
Right.
So it's a very intriguing idea to figure out how do you get frickin' pheasants out of the UK into the system in America.
It would come in the form of a game pie, or it would come in the form of a quasi-processed meal.
Yep.
You could enjoy it. It wouldn't come in the feather, and it wouldn't come pre-processed. And it's interesting. We had an approach from, believe it or not, a cruise liner that wanting us to secure 70,000 breasts of pheasants to be able to serve as people go around on the cruise liner. We are getting there slowly, but we have to marry the level of production of dead game to the level of consumption. And to put it into context, 85% of the game shot in the United Kingdom is exported to Europe.
Wow.
So it's with a degree of concern that with Brexit, we hope they continue to enjoy British shot game.
Yeah. Well, Dylan, it's been a pleasure. I really hope this is the beginning of multiple conversations between the two of us. I think we are certainly struck from the same cloth and have the same thought processes And I very much look forward to having you back on sometime and seeing what can come from what you do and what we do and how we can help each other.
100%. And I think that having once been told, being a garrulous Welshman, I should have either have been a vicar or a teacher, and I did the teaching. I'm extremely grateful for you inviting me on to this. And as I said earlier, communication between ourselves in order to educate those that perhaps don't understand what we do is now almost incumbent upon us, given how easy it is through communication to have this sort of dialogue and conversation.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you, my man.
Very nice to meet you. We will definitely speak soon. Thank you, Robbie.